What's up guys, Kyle here again, and today we are checking out the Orange Tiny Terror. Let's do it! Alright, hope you guys are doing great out there today. If this is your first time here at my channel, what the hell is wrong with you? Just kidding, I'm so happy to have you. My name is Kyle, and what I do is I take awesome high gain amps, overdrives, guitars, speakers, pickups, pedals. I record them with a simple SM57 setup, and I give you guys the unprocessed audio on your end. So if you're into E standard thrash riffs, drop C hardcore riffs, and dudes who like to do irresponsible things to tube amps, you're in the right place. Consider hitting the like button and subscribing on your way out so you don't miss any more of my stuff. Thanks! Okay guys, today we are finally reviewing a piece of orange gear. And I figured, why not start off with literally probably the most popular piece of orange gear on the planet, the Orange Tiny Terror. Prior to picking this head up last week, I have never actually played one of these for myself. I did not know what to expect. I am very pleasantly surprised with the capabilities of this amp. I actually think it sounds really good. But yeah, you guys have been asking me for some orange content pretty much since the start of the channel. You guys know I own a Rocker Verb 50, but I figured, you know what? This is a nice entry into the orange market or the orange segment for me. I think it'd be a lot of fun to mess around with this amp, and we're gonna have some fun with it. So for today, there's not much to go over on this amp because it is a very simple amp. It has a volume, a tone control, a gain control, and then it's got two speaker outs in the back. There is no effects loop. There is nothing else that you can do to shape the tone of this amp. It does have a half power switch on the 7-watt setting. We're just gonna try this thing with a couple of different guitars, and then as of right now, I am miking this through my Randall R212 CB cab, which has two vintage 30s in it. This is basically an oversized Randall 212 cabinet. And then up top, we've got an actual orange PPC 212 with the original V30s in it as well. The reason that I wanted to put it through the Randall cab first is because I am much more familiar with how this cab sounds. The orange definitely has a very different sound, even though it has the same speakers to the Randall cab. So I kind of wanted to hear the amp through a cab I was familiar with so I could describe the amp characteristics before we go over to the orange 212. With that being said, I'm going to shut up. We're gonna get into this actual demo. What I'm playing today is my Edwards LPC 98 guitar. This is a Les Paul custom, made and distributed by ESP Guitars in Japan alone. You have to import these to get them, so it's very true to my Gibson Les Paul customs in my experiments. So yeah, that's what we're using today. And I've got a Lace Dissonant Aggressor, which is the Bill Kelleher signature pickup in the bridge. I absolutely love these pickups, and I figured, you know what, it would probably pair well with this. For the intro clip, I had a simple Boss SD1 on, so we're gonna go ahead and turn that off. We will check out a couple of different boosts with this amp, but that one really seemed to complement the amp well, so I was liking that. I'm going to go ahead, put the tone back to noon, put the gain all the way down to 9 o'clock, and we're going to see what we can get out of this thing. Let's do it. All right, so as you can tell with the gain down at 9 o'clock, the amp is basically clean. So what I tried to do was kind of push the power amp section of the amp to see if we could get some EL34 breakup going, and we did get a little bit. We got a little bit of power tube breakup, but overall it was basically still clean. I'm gonna push the power amp all the way up and see what happens when I push the power amp all the way up. I honestly was really expecting to get a little bit more power amp breakup out of this thing, so that's kind of surprising. I'm gonna go ahead and pull the volume back and dial the gain up. All right, so now we have the gain at about just under 11 o'clock, and I've got the volume just above noon. As you turn that gain up, once it gets past noon, the amp starts to get the amp gets louder once you hit that noon, and then after that, you start adding a lot of saturation. Oh God, words are hard today. But yeah, let's see what kind of tones we can get with these settings. So even though we only have a single tone dial here, you can get a lot of variance just by moving this thing a little bit. So we're gonna start down here at 9 o'clock. I definitely understand why the sludge and the doom rock guys like this thing, because it's very, you can really roll off the top end and just get this like wall of like just kind of sludgy mids, and it sounds pretty cool for that. Not my thing, but you can get more out of that than just that. That. Okay, so as it's dialed right there, it's got this bright kind of vintage Marshall thing going on where it's got that high-end Kerrang and a very, very forward upper mid-range. So let's play something with that. So it does that kind of vintage rock and roll tone very well. It's definitely more round in the mids than say a Marshall is. There's almost like a lower mid kind of congestion thing going on, which is really part of that orange signature tone, that orange signature mid-range. They're definitely not as bright and not as spiky in the mids as a Marshall, but they do still have that British flavor to them. So I'm gonna pull that back. We're gonna up the gain to noon. All right, so again, we're getting there. The saturation's increasing slowly but surely. Let's go ahead and push it up to about 2 o'clock. So now we're pretty much at the level where we're starting to get like a modern level of saturation. It's getting pretty gainy, and if I were to hit it with the boost where the gain is set right now, that's definitely going to kick us into a super saturated tone where you wouldn't really want to take it much further. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. All right, so that Boss SD1 just pairs with this thing perfectly. It gives it that more tight metallic low end, and it definitely gives it a nice upper mid kind of grind to it. I'm turning the boost off. We're going to turn the tone back up. I'm gonna turn the gain up a little bit more. To me, that sounds great on its own with no boost. It sounds really good just like that. so that sounds really, really good for kind of a high gain, almost like a punk rock style tone. That's really what this amp makes me want to play. It makes me want to play. That's what this amp kind of makes me want to play. It definitely makes me lean more into the punk rock and roll style riffs than it does the thrashy stuff or the hardcore stuff like I normally play. The low end is inherently not nearly as tight as something as, say, a Marshall or a 5150. Again, you can kind of tune that up depending on what guitar you're using, what overdrive, and what cabinet. I mean, all those things always come into play, but naturally the amp itself has kind of a round low end. Another thing I will note is this amp and my Rock Reverb is kind of the same way. Not a lot of clarity, and it's weird because it doesn't strike me as muddy in the way that certain amps that I have described as muddy before. Like, it sounds very full, but you're not getting string clarity. So things don't sound bad, like they're getting kind of jumbled together. It's just a very overall smooth type of tone, and there's not a lot of like string or note separation. But again, some people don't really want that. They want a broader sound. They don't want every little thing coming out. So I understand that. For me, I personally like the clarity thing a little bit more. That's kind of one of the reasons why I'm really liking the SD1, is it definitely adds some of the right frequencies to clear the amp up a little bit. So I'm gonna push that tone all the way up. I'm gonna push the gain a little bit more. Man, it sounds really good for that. I'm honestly digging that quite a bit. Let's go ahead, let's switch it over to the orange cab. All right, guys, we are now on the orange PPC 212 with vintage 30s. I have the mic placed exactly the same way as I did on the Randall cab, where I've got the SM57 straight on the speaker where the cap meets the cone half and half. So let's go ahead and see how different it sounds. It is so crazy to me how much of a difference a cabinet, even with the same speakers, can make, because this thing now sounds completely different. It sounds really raunchy, sounds rolled off, but also brighter at the same time. It's really weird. It's like certain frequencies are rolled off, but the cab seems a little bit brighter. It also could be because it's closer to my ears. More than likely that's what's happening. But overall, the tone is really, really different from how it was on the previous cab. So overall, I don't hate it. It definitely sounds a lot more like guttural and kind of mean, but I'm going to roll the gain back. We're going to kick that SD1 on again. All right, so we're back up to standard. Let's play a thrashy riff real quick and see how it handles that. Nasty, guttural, pretty bright, but at the same time, it's just got this low mid grind to it. It's so crazy how much different this cab sounds than the Randall, man. Randall is much more your traditional 412 or 212 sound, a la like a Mesa 212 recto cab or something. It's shaped differently, but they do sound very similar. This one just has its own thing going on, man. It sounds very different. Pairs really well with the orange, go figure. But yeah. Overall comments on the tone of the amp, it definitely lacks low end, and that's not really a big surprise. We're going into a 15 watt EL84 amp. It's not gonna sound huge, but I have played lunchbox amps that have had resonance controls on it, such as the PV Invective Mini Head, where you could really push that low end really hard. Until you really started to push the volume, you would be fooled into thinking that it could be a bigger amp if you weren't necessarily just listening to it without knowing what it was. This one, it just doesn't have the low end, and it has no way to dial it in because you only have a single tone control and you have no effects loop to add an external EQ or anything like that. So you're very, very limited. You're really gonna have to use the guitar, the cabinet, and whatever you can put in front of the amp to kind of shape the tone as much as possible because there's not a lot of options on the amp itself. Real quick, I'm gonna switch over to guitar with active pickups, do a drop C riff, and then we'll call it a day on this thing. All right, guys, we're about a half step lower. I have a Schecter Solo SLS here with the Fishman Modern ceramic active pickups in it. Let's go ahead, hear how it sounds. All right, so quite a bit brighter. I don't think the SD1 pairs as well with this one. Let's go ahead and try the Walrus Ages because I really dig this Overdrive for pretty much everything. So I'm gonna kick the Walrus Ages on and let's hear how that sounds. All right, this thing definitely chugs. It just needs more of a low end push. I'm gonna show you in an episode very soon how to do that, but that's besides the point. So let's go ahead, let's kick on our Digitech drop. Let's see how this thing does with a lower tuning and we'll call it a day. And again, one more overdrive. I'm having fun, and then we will finally call it a day. This amp is much better than I gave it credit for, that's for sure. We're on the Electric Eye Mud Killer, which obviously has much less output. Let's go ahead and dial up the gain. All right, guys, that's gonna do it for me today on the Orange Tiny Terror. What did you think about it? I'm really curious to hear your thoughts. As always, please leave them down in the comment section of this video and I'll meet you down there to chat about it. Overall, this amp surprised me. It's not my favorite amp in the world by any means, but with the right guitar, the right cab, the right boost, I really had it sounding really good, like way better than I originally was expecting. I liked it a lot more than I was expecting to like it. Through the Randall cab, with that SD1 and the Edwards guitar, man, that thing just sounded phenomenal. So I was really happy with what I was getting out of it, especially for such a low cost amp. But yeah, in a future episode, I'm gonna show you how to slave this into a 300 watt power amps. So make sure that you subscribe, hit the like so you don't miss anything, hit the notification so you don't miss that video because it's gonna be a lot of fun. If you wanna support me in what I do here, down in the description of this video are all my support links, including my Sweetwater affiliate link. Click that link, get yourself something nice from the fine folks at Sweetwater, and I get a little kickback. It greatly helps this channel move forward. Or consider becoming a member of my Patreon. Also in the description are the links to the Belligerent Amateur community. You can join my Facebook group and Discord server. Again, all linked in the description of this video. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Kyle here again. We'll see you next time.